Good evening. Today we will present you the topic content-based learning and Clil. So let's look at the presentation outline. Today we will discuss about content-based learning, 5C principles of Clil, Bloom's taxonomy, zone of proximal development, scaffolding techniques, and Cummins' cognitive theory of bilingualism, Biggs and Kalb. So first of all, according to Richards and Rogers, content-based instruction is an approach to second language teaching in which teaching is organized around the content or information that students will acquire rather than around a linguistic or other type of syllabus. So an example of CBI lesson can be approached following these steps. First, preparation, a subject of interest is chosen, and second, finding suitable sources that deal with different aspects of the subject, websites, reference books, audio or video of lectures, or even real people. And the second one is this lesson, using small groups. Next, assigning each group a small research task and a source of information in the target language to use to help them fulfill the task. Next one, groups sharing and comparing information, and then a result in the form of an end product such as a report or presentation of some kind. So, example, in content-based instructions, students are given handouts with vocabulary items with which they fill a close passage and watch a video on the topic. So this can be a short definition and how it looks like. So let's move to the advantages and disadvantages. So language learning becomes more interesting and motivating in CBI. CBI offer wide educational knowledge to learners in the form of the different topics instructed. Then it helps students develop valuable study skills such as note-taking, summarizing, and extracting key information from text. Developing collaborative skills, especially when using group work, which can have great social value. So as advantages, of course, we have some disadvantages. So here they are. CBI implicit language instruction can confuse learners and may give them the impression that they are not actually learning language. Overuse of native language can be a problem in some parts of the lesson. And the last one, finding information sources and text that lower levels can understand can be difficult. Now let's move to the Clil. What is Clil? The term content and language integrated learning was originally defined in 1994 and launched in 1996 by Unicom, University of Jyväskylä, and the European Platform for Dutch Education to describe educational methods where subjects are taught through a foreign language with dual focused aims, namely the learning of content and the simultaneous learning of a foreign language. The essence of Clil is that content subjects are taught and learned in a language which is not mother tongue of the learner. Now let's move to the 5C principles of Clil. First one is content. Content in traditional teaching, teachers prepare a lesson around the logical development of the area the students have been working on. It's just the same with Clil. Teachers develop lessons around what the student already know. In this way, students build their content knowledge like building a wall or one course of bricks on the top of the next. So next one is communication. Yep. In the past, students learned a lot of lesson content while they were listening to the teacher talk. With Clil, teachers talk much less because the students don't have enough of the new language to learn in this way. Instead, students study together and work in groups talking to each other as well as to the teacher, using as much of the new language as they can. A Clil teacher needs to ask herself a series of questions like what sort of communication will the students be involved in, what language will be useful for that communication, and etc. So next one is competence. Yeah. Can-do statements describe the outcomes of a lesson. For example, I can calculate the area of a triangle. Clil teachers think about the can-do statements they want their students to be able to make after the lesson, either about lesson content and skills or about new language. Next one is community. Clil teachers help students to relate that they learn to the world around them. Students see that what they learn is not just a school subject, but something that relates to the real world. So the Clil teacher therefore needs to think about what is the relevance of this lesson to the students' daily life and surroundings. How does it link to the community or culture surrounding the students, and does it also link to other cultures? And the last one is cognition. Of course, teachers were helping students learn to think long before the Clil approach was introduced. They have always asked their students when, where, which, how many, and who. These questions focus on real, specific, and concrete answers. Students who learn to answer them correctly develop the thinking skills and recalling, repeating, and listing, and of understanding. So example activities can be such as listen and label a diagram, picture, map, or graph, chart. Listen and fill in the gaps in the text. Word guessing games. Also question loops, questions and answers, terms and definitions, and etc. Now we are slightly moving to the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. Student following a Clil course will soon have learned to think about such probing questions as why, how, and what evidence is there, as I mentioned before, and so we'll have practiced some of the thinking skills categorized by Bloom as higher order thinking skills. Also, we call them HOTS. In 1950s, developed by Benjamin Bloom, using HOTS encouraged students to investigate and evaluate new information, to use it to develop something new. It can be useful to think of Bloom's taxonomy in terms of learning behaviors. We have to remember a concept before we understand it. We have to understand a concept before we can apply it. We have to be able to apply a concept before we can analyze it. We have to analyze a concept before we can evaluate it. And the last one, we have to remember, understand, apply, analyze, and evaluate a concept before we can create. Okay, now let's talk about the zone of proximal development. According to Lev Vygotsky, the distance between the actual developmental level of the learner as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. So the zone of proximal development is the gap between what a learner has mastered and what they can potentially master with support and assistance. Sorry. This concept, highly influential in educational psychology, was first introduced by Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky in the 1930s. So here we have kind of examples of ZPD. So first, let me introduce one of them. A student is able to perform simple addition when working with a teacher or parent, but is frustrated when performing the task alone. By guiding the student to use tools and strategies, and by asking questions about why he or she is using each tool or strategy, the student is able to fortify knowledge and eventually act independently. Now let's move to the scaffolding. So this term was introduced by Jerome Brunner in the late 1950s, who defined scaffolding in teaching a second language as a process of setting up the situation to make the child's entry easy and successful, and then gradually pulling back and handling the role to the child as they become skilled enough to manage it. Brunner coined the term scaffolding, taking into account the ZPD theory developed by Russian psychologists, as I mentioned before, Lev Vygotsky. According to it, learners make the biggest progress while doing challenging tasks, which they can perform individually or with some help of peers or a teacher. The amount of scaffolding depends on the student's needs at every step of a lesson. Okay, we have here scaffolding techniques, and they are 6. Let's talk about each of them. First, linguistic scaffolding. In case a class or an individual struggles with a text, the teacher can simplify the instructional language, introduce vocabulary before reading, write down instructions, slow down the pace of the speech, provide students with direct explanations of form and meaning. Second one is cognitive scaffolding. It provides a supportive framework for meaning, for example, charts, visuals, checklists, games, simulations, experiments, authentic materials, websites, condensed materials, body language modeling, and etc. Next, metacognitive scaffolding. Students, with the help of a teacher, analyze their own thinking process for more efficient learning. Examples: thinking aloud, planning how to accomplish a task, and self-assessment. Metacognitive scaffolding can be in the form of questions, guides, prompts, or sequenced interactions. Fourth one, social scaffolding. It involves social interactions such as group and pair work, teachers' assistance, native speakers help. Next, cultural scaffolding. Students' prior knowledge and familiar cultural context put the students in a habitual environment, reducing anxiety and placing new information on a solid basis. And the last one is emotive scaffolding. As the name shows, it covers teachers' approval and encouragement of students' performance. Okay, now we are here to talk about BICS and COP. Jim Cummins, a professor at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education of the University of Toronto, came up with these phrases in 1984 when he encouraged challenges with categorizing learning problems of students who were studying in a second language. So in his opinion, students who seem to talk without a lot of problems still seem to miss out on more academic skills. However, there was no way to categorize that. That's when he came up with BICS and CALP. BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, or in normal English, Basic Language Skills. This is the level of language a person has when communicating in everyday life or class situations, and is used particularly in informal communication. So let's look at the key elements of BICS. First is context, reach, topics are concrete and make sense. Cognitively undemanding, easy to understand, everyday language, simple structures, takes 2 to 5 years to achieve as a second language, and BICS often refers to speaking and listening skills. Examples: understanding written worksheets, understanding and using nonverbal communication, and understanding and using simple and short texts. Next, CALP. Yep, the abbreviation stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, or in normal English, academic language use. CALP is the language necessary to understand and discuss content in the classroom or at university or other academic environment. So the main key elements of CALP: first, context reduced. Topics are more abstract and need a certain level of prior knowledge. Second, cognitively demanding, specialized vocabulary and more complex language structure. And takes 5 to 7 years to achieve as a second language. CALP is used with all language skills. Examples: writing an essay, understanding a scientific paper, or reading content area textbooks. So that is all. Here you can see our references. Thank you for attention.